So in the 10th grade, we had an excellent teacher for honors English. I'll call her Mrs. D. Mrs. D was a bit of a snob. She would say things to us like, "Oh, none of your parents have ever taken you to an opera? I don't believe that." One day she announces that we're going to start a poetry unit the next day, and that each of us is to bring in our favorite poem. So I went to my best friend Debbie's house after school. Debbie fancied herself an artsy bohemian, and she had been writing poetry in the style of E. E. Cummings. And Debbie says to me, "Let's bring in one of my poems and pass it off as E. E. Cummings." I say, "No way." But the next day, when Mrs. D's query as to who had brought a poem in was met with deafening silence, I hesitated way too briefly, and then I raised my hand. "I have a poem, it's by E. E. Cummings." "Wonderful," she says, "read it to the class." I said, "Well, you know, E. E. Cummings is very visual. Maybe I should write it on the board." "Marvelous," she says, "write it on the board." So I'm writing on the board, you know, the words going every which way, no capital letters and everything. And she's reading it, and she says, "Oh yes, this poem. Which book is this poem in?" And I say, "I don't know, my parents have an anthology at home." The most lively classroom discussion you can imagine then ensues. People are finding themes in this poem, death and life and who knows what. Debbie keeps her head down the whole time, doesn't say one word. But I chimed in a couple of times. So we go back to her house after school, and we're laughing about this. And her mother, who was a teacher, and my second mother, overhears and is utterly appalled. She says, "You're going back into school tomorrow. You're going to tell the teacher what you did and apologize." Okay, so the next day, our classmates are filing out. We go up to the teacher, and I say to Mrs. D, "About that poem yesterday." She said, "Oh, we used that poem again in the 4th hour. We had a fabulous discussion in the 4th hour. Thank you so much." So I said, "Well, the thing is, Debbie wrote it." A look of horror passes over her face. But to her great credit, she somehow manages to turn the corners of her mouth up into a grimacy smile, and she says, "Oh, how clever of you girls." 3 years later, I started college right here, and the first semester I took a course in poetry. And our first assignment was to read a particular poem and write a paper. When the teacher came in after grading the papers, he said that he was disappointed and dismayed at the poor quality of our work. He said, "None of you know how to write. You don't know how to analyze a poem. The grades were very bad, mostly C's and D's." Well, I was delighted with a B+. And I knew even then that I was better equipped than my classmates to handle that assignment because our teachers had taught us how to write. And they had taught us how to analyze poetry. We certainly analyzed the hell out of Debbie's fake E. E. Cummings poem. I went back to school at the end of the first year, and I saw Mrs. D. I had lost 40 pounds. I was getting all A's. I was enjoying the college experience. She said she wasn't surprised by the grades, but she was so glad to see how well I was doing. She said, "We were all so worried about you." I was stunned at the moment because really school had been a haven for me for some very serious family problems, some of which included scandal and the harsh glare of media in the local area. So it was tough. But I thought I had maintained a fairly happy-go-lucky demeanor. I had solid friends who had my back. I was involved in activities. I didn't know that my teachers saw my pain. And when she said that, I realized that they cared very much about me and that I felt that they loved me. And I've carried that feeling with me ever since. And the lesson that I've learned is that the good teachers, they want their students to be successful academically and professionally, but they want those successes to help their students live happy lives. And with their help, I have it all.